We're rolling like
rolling on a
like
river.
a limp biscuit. But don't look up what that means. You guys ever had high chew?
I have. It's been a long time.
Oh,
you can't just talk about Limp Bizkit and change the subject.
And then haichu.
Haichu.
I got a bag of haichu, and it's lasted me forever, so I need to eat some of it. These green apples are garbo.
Every time somebody says haichu, I think it must be an evolved form of Pikachu.
Yeah, it's the third one.
It's like Raichu.
Haichu.
The mango's pretty good.
The third Pikachu you eat, that's how he finally dies. You're after he wins, you're supposed to eat him, like when a praying mantis kills her mate after sex.
I just realized.
Sorry,
this is a terrible idea for being on microphone. What am I doing? Oh my god!
Eating like a.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We're here with Chewbacca
with saltwater taffy, and I'm a man who enjoys my taffy. Well, okay.
I'm gonna chew this away from Mike.
Welcome back to the show. If you've been here before, you know to expect nonsense like that by now. Was this episode 467? Yeah. It's been a lot of eating into the microphone and non sequiturs.
Yep.
See the poop episode, the human poop episode, if you'd like more
Don't
evidence.
Don't bring it up again, man. Like
I'm back selling.
No.
I'm backside selling.
No one wants to listen to it in the first place.
Was it your poop or was it a child's poop? I hope it was a child's poop.
No, it wasn't. It was it was astronaut poop.
No.
Oh, but there was no actual poop involved. Like
no
poop got on you.
No,
I thought you were correct. Okay,
not in this story.
This story would have been great. I thought you were going to tell me that one of you came back from changing a diaper and the other realized that you had poop on you.
No, I have yet to be pooped on.
Never?
You've never been pooped on?
No.
Oh man, like every one of my kids have pooped on my legs before.
Really?
I thought it was a normal occurrence.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's pooped when I've been holding him, but the poop doesn't get on me.
Okay.
Do you just
cool? Maybe
I'll
have a kid.
Hold him out like this. Like
I hold him upside down.
Okay. If you poop, it's getting on you. Getting on just you.
It's on you.
Not what they did in Lion King.
Well, we're hi Kellen. Hi Dustin.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
What's up?
Well, we're here to talk about a movie tonight, and we've actually got a new release. But by the time this comes out, it'll be May, so not super new, but in theaters still. So, if the world still exists by May 3rd, let's hope so. If you're listening to this, congratulations, we made it. Every one of us. All right, let's get on into it. We're going to talk about Civil War tonight.
19 states have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything on.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
Citizens of America, the so-called Western forces of Texas and California have suffered a very great defeat at the hands of the United States military.
Mr. President, do you regret the use of airstrikes against American citizens? We're moving to D.C. today.
You need to go down there.
They shoot journalists on sight in the Capitol. Every instinct in me says this is death.
Bloody.
Every time I survived a war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this. But here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay? Okay.
What kind of American are you? You don't know?
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
Oh my God.
Get in the car! Get in the car! Move, move, move!
You're gonna hang back.
I'm not hanging back.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go, 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 go!
God bless America.
Civil War is written and directed by Alex Garland, stars Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moira, Kaylee Spaniani. These are getting
wanna do
more
another take of
difficult. Stephen McKinley Henderson,
There you go. That one.
Sonoya Mizuno, and Nick Offerman. Okay. Oh, made it. Anchor leg. All right. So this is an A24 movie in a sort of dystopian alternate present, I guess, or whatever. I don't know. It's kind of ambiguous. And it's essentially America is within the midst of a civil conflict. There's several different factions of like freedom fighters sort of jockeying for the takedown of like Washington, D.C. Sides are a bit unclear. The exact nature of the conflict is a bit unclear. Our characters are photojournalists, photographers, who are trying to make their way to Washington, D.C. to get a chance to interview President Nick Offerman before.
Wait, did they name him?
No,
I don't think so.
No, they want to interview the president before they can't get access, or it's implied before he's assassinated or before he escapes Washington, flees, or they just simply can't get in safely. So that's the plot. They're making the way from New York, kind of indirectly down to Washington, D.C. through like the rural Northeast, back inwards to the DC perimeter. So yeah, so this is a movie that's in theaters now, and I'm sort of, obviously we'll get into spoilers at some point, but I wanted to kind of just rumble through my thoughts on it real quick before I pass it off to you guys, so we can kind of just springboard. So here's what I wrote. I think it's tough to recommend this movie to the general audience because I think it's unlikely to meet their expectations of what a summer blockbuster war movie is, with clear moral boundaries. Notable aspects of the movie, either way you slice it, are the absence of clear good guys and bad guys. There's not a side of the conflict that's depicted as right or wrong necessarily. We just sort of join the photojournalists in the dispassionate voyeurism as violence and war are happening around them. So this treatment of the story is a double-edged sword for me, because on one hand, it allows us, the audience, to ask questions and have discussions and judge the events of the film at face value. Wow, this is scary. Wow, this is dangerous. Wow, this sucks. And without assigning a moral justification to the actions of one side over another, which is what a lot of movies probably would do. On the other hand, I do feel less connected to these characters as they move through the conflict, and I'm keenly aware of the danger they're in, like I said, and the sequences of firefights through which they move are scary and thrilling and, exciting to watch. I just think it's a film with layers that may reward rewatches for those interested in watching this film a second time. And if you're interested in tracking those character arcs, and I think it might disappoint a mainstream audience who think they're going to get a more clear-cut good versus evil conflict, or at least a more interesting, clear one. But the context that matters here is I knew all this going into the movie. This is an A24 film directed by Alex Garland, written by Alex Garland. So I knew not to expect those things. So I wasn't really let down by the film as much as I was left, as I usually am at the end of his movies, which is like, huh. So it's a low recommendation for me to see. I would put it on your list if you liked Ex Machina or Annihilation, but I would not rank it above those films. I think Ex Machina of those three has the most, it feels the most like a movie that tells a story and finishes that story. It's not really ambiguous. The plot's not ambiguous. The motivation perhaps is ambiguous at the end of that film. Annihilation's a little more open-ended, but that one has a whole lot of layers, a lot of rewatch, and a lot more craft to it than, well, science fiction craft to it. This is not a sci-fi film, so there's not as much wonder here as there is with Annihilation, where you're like, oh shit, people are turning into plants and this crazy bear. Sorry,
there's like a really beautiful moment in that movie, and if anybody hasn't seen that, they're just like, the fuck?
People turn. Yeah. If I were to just show you that clip out of context, you'd be like, I'm sorry.
What is this?
You're saying science did this? What is this?
And if I were also to show you, help me.
Oh God, no.
You would just have nightmares and never understand.
Yes.
So I would and do like those films more than this, but in terms of a more grounded, less science fiction-y film, I think it's really solid. I think it just is not what people are used to seeing or are expecting to see unless they know who Alex Garland is. And, so I don't know. And I don't know what my star rating would be. I think it's probably like a 3.5 or something. It's hard for me to come down on the film for its choices, as they're deliberate and they have, I think they have the desired effect. I think it's just, this is the kind of movie it is. It's not so much like, well, not a very good action movie. It's not really an action movie. So I think based on what the film's trying to be, I think it succeeds. It just depends on who you, the viewer, are and the baggage you bring to it. So that's what I think. I don't know. Dustin, I don't know. What did you think of this?
Yeah, mostly the same. I mean, I feel like it's a well-made film. Like, you can't deny its craft. Kirsten Dunst, I haven't seen her in a long time. Like, it feels like forever since I've seen her in anything, but I thought she did a really great job here. And really all of the cast did. They brought these characters to life, made them feel real and lived in, and that's fantastic. And so big kudos to them. I mean, even like Jesse Plemons, who is in this for one scene, like feels like a real person, super scary, creepy one, but a real person. And that's a huge testament, I think, both to the actors, but also to the writing. The biggest problem I have with it is that I do feel like the film kept me at arm's length. And part of that is because of the choice to keep mysterious about the nature of the conflict and these things. And really, we say this a lot, but like, your mileage may vary depending on what you personally, as an audience member, like to see in terms of, like, I really like when the stakes seem clear. So for instance, in this one, these characters, as you mentioned, want to get to Washington, D.C. to interview the president, but it's never really clear what they intend to do with that interview or how that might affect the struggle moving forward. You get the sense that maybe these journalists have detached themselves from the morality of the issue and are a little more just detached from humanity in general. And while that's intriguing, I think that because they're detached, it makes it feel a little bit like their goal is purely selfish and not necessarily for any kind of greater good, which to me makes the stakes harder. It makes the journey harder for me to root for because I'm not clear what's to be gained by it. If the only thing is to gain notoriety or to gain some sort of like a selfish kind of like look what we did kind of a thing, like pat on the back, then that's great, but not necessarily rootable. That's not a word, but like I can't really root for that very well. So I respond to clear whys in storytelling. I want to know, why does this matter, and why are you, the filmmaker, asking me to care? And I feel like it was a little vague, and that may be the point, but to me, it has the sort of side effect of making me feel detached as well. So I couldn't really root for the characters in the way that I wanted to, had they had some sort of a thing. And I thought they were going to go this direction with Kirsten Dunst having clearly had some like PTSD, and like maybe she's telling this new young cub reporter, you need to detach, you can't think about these things, but maybe that she was going to be struggling with that. And maybe they touched on it, but I don't feel like it ever went far enough for me to understand where she was coming from. And then as far as like, because essentially this is a road trip movie, it is, characters going on a road trip and encountering different scenarios. And this has been done a million times dating back to Homer. But generally, when you do these types of road trip type movies, you end up with some sort of cohesion to these little vignetted, incidents. And I feel like this feels a little disjointed to me. A good example, there's a moment probably about midway through the film where they encounter what's like this golf club or something, and it's like decorated for Christmas, and there's some little skirmish that's happening. But I'm not sure what purpose that serves in propelling our story forward or in changing our characters moving forward. And every scene of your film should be either driving story or driving character change. And I'm not sure, like I'm unclear, and maybe this is a fault of me, but I'm not entirely clear on what that particular story does, what that incident does for our characters. And so it has the, again, unintended side effect of making this feel a little disjointed. So it's a lot of really cool moments, but I'm not sure why they're tied together or what they're saying. So great filmmaking, great acting aside, I felt like the story needed another pass. And one thing that would have really helped it is to clarify what the characters are feeling and why we should care about what they're going through. So I gave it like 3, maybe 3.5 stars if I'm generous, but it's not one that I'm soon to revisit. And we can talk more about maybe why that is, but like, I also don't regret having seen it. Like, I think it's certainly well worth your time, if only for the filmmaking and if only for the performances, but you really do need to temper your expectations. And I think I had the benefit of, I didn't see a trailer. I saw one little 10-second YouTube spot. It was like, that's all I had seen. And it featured Jesse Plemons. And I was like, that's enough. Yeah, I'm there. I'm there. I'll see it. And so I think that, just temper your expectations. Like you said, Hooper, it's not an action movie. It's not really a war movie. It's a road trip movie. And it just happens to take place in a setting that's, war adjacent.
At war. Yeah. Don't ever let marketing fool you.
Yeah.
This is part of the reason to just ignore trailers in general.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly.
Only listen to our show. Don't watch any trailers. but for real, like it used to be before, like we even saw trailers online. You either saw them when you're already at the movies.
Yeah.
Or you just heard from your friends that something was good. Yeah, or TV.
Spots.
I was thinking this the other day, like what there's a movie that I only checked out. I can't even think of what it was, but like there was some big movie that I loved today that I only checked out because all my friends kept asking if it was Office Space. That wasn't even like that big movie, but I love Office Space. It's a really good movie. And I didn't watch King of the Hill. I had never heard of Mike Judge. Even at 10 years old, I wouldn't have understood that. I'm
3 seasons into a King of the Hill binge right now.
Yeah, I know. That's why that's part of what made me think about it. Is because I knew you were watching. and I was listening to somebody talk about Idiocracy, which, just quick side note, I'd like to get you back, Kellen, for when we talk about that movie next year. Because it will be the 20th anniversary of it coming out.
I saw it in theaters.
I need to rewatch it. The only time I've ever seen that is in our college dorm room, Kellen, with you.
I've seen that movie. I've seen that movie like 13 times.
One night, Hooper, Kellen was just like, "You have to watch this movie," and I was like, "Okay," and I watched it, and I remember thinking like, "That's really funny." I don't think I like paid attention for the first half though. Like I think I checked out, and then by like the second half I was like, oh, this is really cool, but I'd already forgotten the first half because I was only half paying attention.
Dustin probably saw the "ow my balls" sequence and was just like, I can't do this right.
Disengage.
I was probably like halfway through some like schoolwork and was like, I can't focus. I don't know what I was doing, but like I was not focused.
The point being, word of mouth has become underrated again, and it should become rated.
Yes,
appropriately. Maybe next time you will estimate me.
You will estimate me. I'll tell you what.
All right, Kellen. What about you?
So I share basically like pretty much the same thoughts as all y'all.
Podcast over. Thanks, everybody.
But it's like those assemblage of thoughts come out with something a little bit more positive, or at least a little bit more like willing to want to discuss kind of the difficulties of, you know, the scenario that he put himself into. Garland did. So I guess my way of setting this up is I did see he was interviewed by Jon Stewart not Jon Stewart, one of the other Daily Show correspondents. I can't remember his name, but he was interviewed on the Daily Show, and he kind of broke down like his entire point to the movie. So it makes more sense to me, but therefore it definitely makes sense why the movie's so polarizing and why, like, you know, some friends of mine saw it and were pissed off because they were like, what the hell is this? This is not what we expected. And then some others have been like, well, you know, I guess let me just set the stage. So if you're going to make a Civil War movie about modern America, that's like like everybody first saw the trailer and was like, what the F? You know what I mean? Like, like, are we really going to make media entertainment out of like the tensions in our country that seem to be boiling to that point should some horrible spark go off?
Yeah.
So no, I unless you're an extremely disgusting masochist, nobody wants to watch that movie, which is everything about now projected out a little forward in the worst circumstances.
January 6th, part 2, but fun.
And so what's crazy is that he was writing this before that even happened. So he was writing this from a standpoint of like the 2016 election and just seeing, you know, he's an Englishman, and, you know, his standpoint was like the Civil War, the dissolving of the United States via a civil war, some sort of internal conflict, is literally like nobody in the world is really wishing that upon the United States, just because of, and not for out of any like extreme goodwill towards them.
We're just a big player.
We are so intrinsic that like so much of the world would fall apart because of them. That's not like a pat ourselves on the back thing. That's him going, you need to get your shit together or else like we're all doomed.
Yeah. So
his standpoint wasn't to make something about, you know, the January 6th thing or where things have gone from there. So when you're sitting down to write a movie about that, you go, okay, we're going to do an alternate universe. And that's what he did with this. But by doing so, he probably realized like, well, that's also not quite hitting the points that I want, because as he was saying in that interview, the whole point of the movie is complete and utter aversion to this as a prospect, no matter what you feel on the moral spectrum, and a complete reverence and understanding of how important photojournalism is in war zones.
Yeah.
So the protagonist in the film is wartime journalism. The antagonist is anything that is against that in terms of it displaying and telling the most like gritty truth that you can about the horrors of war. So in my opinion, that's why his protagonist is really just all of those characters in one. They're all showing different stages of that career path, if you want to call it that. And, you know, there's the innocence, there's the loss of the innocence. And then, you know, I think that Mora, what's his name again? He's a Brazilian guy.
Joel.
Yeah, Joel.
Yep.
And it was
Jesse and
Lee.
Lee. Yep.
Yeah, Lee was the Kirsten Dunst character.
Joel and Lee are kind of two heads of the same coin, where Lee has become like completely detached and knows that her only way to, you know, function through this is to kind of stuff it all down, which eventually erupts as PTSD at the end.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Sorry. And then Joel is basically like, we don't know exactly who these factions that were having a shootout are. We just know that at the end of it, he's having a cigarette and smoking and joking with one of the ones that was probably like a militiaman, wearing like a Hawaiian shirt. And like that while I don't think that these characters were super duper deep, and it's because you couldn't really talk about their morals, because not only do we not know where they stand on the conflict in the United States in this movie, we also don't really know where they stand in general, because their whole existence is to throw away the moral side of it and just be there snapping photos of it. They're good people because they're looking out for one another, but they're bad people because, you know, literally people get killed because of them in different circumstances. So I'm kind of getting lost at this point. So I think that Garland set himself up for a little bit of a fall. I don't have any qualms saying that, like, I don't think this movie could have been fully successful, because instead of going fully unrelated, he started injecting little bits and pieces that are kind of like modern America politics, like jargon and little like sound bites and stuff. At one point, he makes mention of an Antifa massacre. The footage at the beginning was something from, like, he licensed it from like some guy who was like involved in like the Boogaloo Boy stuff. So there's like actual current American politics, and by drip feeding those into the conflict, you know, as texture in the movie, it made me just go, well, now I need to figure out who's like the people that are wanting to overthrow the country for the bad, you know. So I think by tiptoeing around it while also dipping his toe kind of like in the water, that kind of ruined it for a lot of people, because a friend of mine came back and he goes, I don't know who the good guys were, blah, 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 blah. And I like, that's kind of the point, if you are able to contextualize it, knowing why he went into it the way that he did when he was writing it. So by the end of the film, I think the entire point was to say, this is absolutely terrifying. If you're in this situation, you don't know how to identify who is an enemy, who isn't. You know, we're all, you know, Americans. What kind of American are you? Right. And so, Dustin, I guess to speak specifically to one of the points that you were making about, like, you didn't know what that sniper back and forth on the golf course situation was all about. Well, I don't think it needed to go on that long or be, you know, as, you know, even its placement in the film timeline was a little weird. But like, I think the point of that was, look, I don't even know who this guy is that I'm shooting. All I know is he wants to kill me. And in a war that's already a hard to identify enemies, all I know is I just don't want to die. So I think that's what that was going for. I think the film does go out of its way to show you some absolute villains, you know, people dumping civilian bodies into a pit and throwing lime on them.
Mass grave.
Like, that was the most clear-cut villain. And then obviously, you know, if you go by American standards of good and evil, as far as our Constitution or whatever, the movie does not really make many bones about the fact that this is an autocratic president who's installed himself for a third term. Which, according to our American principles, is like, cool, it doesn't matter what you believe, you get the fuck out of there.
You don't do that.
So what I think is just going to ruffle people's feathers is that there's no like front line. It's not about soldiers. It's not about the values. It's not about the moral right and wrong. You know, this third president third term president isn't like, it says he's doing air assaults on American citizens and stuff. So like, that's really bad, but he's not like, it's not so much that it's like a World War II movie where you're fighting against someone who is wiping out and eradicating an entire people. So
yeah,
I guess I liked it. I recommend it for people, but I think they need to contextualize it before they go in because it's not what the F you think it's going to be when you go in unless you come in informed. On a technical level, it did feel cheap to a certain extent, and that's not really a derogatory. It's more along the lines of he chose the format of a road movie, which is, location scouting and getting, a car on a rig with your actors in it and stuff. So like, I don't besmirch him for that. It just felt pretty lopsided. I didn't dislike the quiet stuff in the cars and all that these smaller conflicts and stuff, especially ones when they cut away from showing you the first like atrocity, which I thought was effective because the whole point was about how it damaged Jesse's psyche. But I thought the end was effectively bombastic and scary. I went to it with my buddy Pedro, who is from Brazil. Granted, he's lived in the United States for probably about 6-7 years total now. And so at the end of it, he was like, yeah, there's a certain amount of detachment. Like, I certainly know the culture well enough, but like, this isn't gonna like strike at anything at my core kind of thing. And he was like, he said that because of that, he was letting himself look at me during the movie and like, I enjoyed it and everything. Yeah. I was definitely affected by it. He said he kept looking at me and I was like doing different versions of this because like every time there is a conflict in it, the mystery of it and you don't know who is who and what's going to happen is really fucking scary. And especially at the end when there's tanks rolling by, like that felt a little outlandish, spoiler alert. Sorry for them to be there on the actual assault on the fortress walls around the White House and stuff. But so anyway, I would recommend with a huge caveat. I would also say, like you, was it Connor or Dustin? One of you said, I liked it enough, but I don't want to watch it again. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It feels like the purpose was to smack you in the face and say, hey, look, you live in this country, it can happen. And do you know how intensely awful that would be for everybody?
Yeah, and I think to me, one of the most interesting points that the film has to make is when it's talking about how awful it would be for people. And when we're talking about the effects that it would have on the general public. So 2 scenes come to mind. One being when they stop in this little town, it's like this quaint, what the world used to be type of town. And they clearly are ignoring all the problems that are going on. Like they're ignoring wartime. And even Lee and Jesse both make mention of their parents living out in like the Midwest somewhere, ignoring all of it. It's like, to me, that's interesting. This idea that the world is falling apart and here's this pocket that they just don't care.
Well, it's because the country's so big. So like it is going to affect people differently. Correct. There's an ability to disappear if you want to, just because of how broad our country is. Right.
And that to me is interesting. And then the second, another, interesting part, it's similar is Jesse Plemons' character. Obviously, like you said, the most clear-cut bad guy, but this idea that during wartime, when, law enforcement's eyes are turned to bigger things, it allows for people that are already, twisted or who will become twisted by the war to do very evil things unchecked. And to me, that's a super interesting idea. Like, let's talk about the fact that it's like the purge out here. We can kill anybody. We can do whatever we want because we're small potatoes. Everyone's worried about the president. Everyone's worried about the war. No one cares what I'm doing in my backyard. And to me, that's super interesting. And so I was more engaged when we were when it's almost like world building, but it's like, what's happening in the world. Yeah. And then when you have stuff like that's more based on what's happening with the military, I started to check out a little bit because I'm I'm just not clear on what's happening. Like if the, when I was in the movie, I'm thinking like, if the point of this is to just remind me how awful this would be if it happened, like I kind of already know that. So I'm more interested in like seeing that depicted, and the way that I'm more interested in seeing that depicted is how it's affecting individuals, not necessarily how the military is dealing with it. And that's just me. Like that's what I'm interested in. How are individuals, like what's an individual story that you can tell? But as far as like, you know, I mean, I guess we can jump into spoilers. You want to just jump into spoilers? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I already blew it. So.
I was just saying, why not? Like, let's just jump in there.
We'll officially go to spoilers now.
Okay, spoilers, yay. Like towards the end, when Lee's kind of having her PTSD, and there's this, you know, the assault on the White House. Again, to me, I'm just less interested in this because what's happening to the president, I'm just not clear on like the ramifications of this. And or how this skirmish is like how the war is affecting him. Like had it been again more about like, look, I didn't intend for this to happen. Like you could go one of a couple ways, right? It's, you know, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen. I just tried to do my best and all this happened and oh, woe is me. Or you can do the, you know, like, yeah, I'm an evil dude and I wanted this to happen. So you could do, you know, several different things. And I felt like they kind of didn't want to do any of those things character wise. And again, maybe that's the point, but like, I guess I was going in looking for that. Like what are each of these characters' motivations? And so when it came to someone like the president, who I just felt like was a figurehead, but not necessarily a character. That's where, and then you throw someone like Nick Offerman in there, which again, another reason, like I kneh he was in the movie. And so I'm like, oh, Nick Offerman. And he's, you know, in a grand total of like 4 minutes of the movie. And 3 of those are in voiceover. It was, I don't know. It was underwhelming. Like I understand maybe that was the point, but like, I wanted him to be more of a character and more of a presence. And like, I don't know. It is more cliche though, that you get to the president and then you get the big like monologue of like, you know, this is what I wanted for America kind of stuff. And yeah, that's more cliche and, you know, whatever. So like you can't have your cake and eat it too. But I do feel like, you know, there was some middle ground there that maybe we should have gone to. But yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is I was more interested in the individual character side of things. You know, this shopkeeper who was ignoring everything, or, you know, Jesse Plemons, who was trying to do what he's always wanted to do. Presumably he's some, you know, crazy, you know, alt-right bigot kind of character, whatever, that, you know, has always wanted to round people up and kill them. And now is his opportunity. You know, who knows, but like, you know, that was more interesting to me than watching the assault on the White House or whatever. Cause, or even this at the golf club, because I'm like, again, what's really what's the character of it? Who's the character that I'm supposed to be learning about or seeing this through their eyes or whatever. And so, yeah, I understand it, but like, I guess, you know, coming at it from that like character first mindset, maybe is the downfall of me watching this film.
You just talking through like all those points just kind of made it really obvious to me that like this movie, more than a lot of them I've seen in a while, feels full of extremely deliberate choices about things that could go sour for some people. You know what I mean? Like, so I think he did, either it was a narrative device or something, or just did a kindness for the viewer. Like that opening practice speech that Offerman's president was giving felt like a kind of like here, this is what you get as world building texture. And it's just in this room, in this claustrophobic camera right up in his face. Yep. This is all you're going to get. Because as I was playing it back in my head and you were talking about like why, you know, he was hardly in the movie and everything, you know, I realized that I think every single shot and sequence was something, you know, not literally from the POV of the core photojournalist, but like is their experience. So the only way he could make his way back into the film, or I guess for the first time, you know, if we're thinking that's a little universe outside of the actual film, is via how that culminated in the room. And I I noticed that very heavily. Like when they were doing their assault on the White House in an action movie, it would cut between sides and you would see some Secret Service people doing something and moving the president or something.
Yeah.
You never see that. All you see is from, their quote unquote perspective. And so that hallways perfect for, literally 180 cutting, like from scenario to scenario. And all you see is just down this one sort of thing. So I think a lot of the issues that some folks are going to have with it is that it comes very specifically from one point of view of your group of characters, and you don't really get any information that they don't see firsthand. And they are just in a world where they've seen all this, and there's a lot of stuff they already know, and nobody's going to take the time to explain it to you.
Yeah.
And I think that again goes back to his point wasn't to, I think this thing about the current happenings in American politics, and they're the good guys now, and I'm going to make a movie where they kill the bad guys. And it's just, that's not what he wanted, because he seems like a British enough dude that has a distaste for probably just generally, I don't know, maybe I just got a vibe in the interview that he's just like, we don't all love you so much that we care about a civil war, but it's like, this is really just bad news for all of us. So don't let this happen.
Right.
So I think that's why there's no reverence for anybody in the film.
Sure. It's interesting. As you were talking about that, my mind went to disaster movies. So I'm not going to sit here and try to compare this to Cloverfield, but I guess I am, because it's the first thing that came to my mind. Cloverfield is an example of characters going on a journey, like a trip that, they're evacuating from their home after this, giant monster attacks or whatever. And it's told through their perspective, literally the perspective of the cameraman. And you don't get any information that they wouldn't get. So there's no scene of like, sitting in the boardroom with a bunch of scientists and they're like, well, you see, he came from outer space and he goes here. And there's none of that. It's just like, hey, shock and horror, let's get out of here. Let's do this thing. And it's that journey. But what Cloverfield does, it's not a great example because it's not like Cloverfield's a classic, whatever. But what I'm saying is like,
a lot of caveating.
I'm doing a lot of caveating, but what I am saying is like, what maybe I resonate better with is, okay, what we knew we had to do in that film was, one, get to our protagonist's girlfriend's house to see if she's alive, rescue her, and get to get to safety. Right. And so it's very clear what they're doing. And Connor, I've said this a million times, like survival is not a good enough goal for a character.
Right.
And so that's where Cloverfield starts to fall short. But part of their goal was to reconcile their relationship. And part of the goal was to find her and save her. And so to me, it's way easier to root for that scenario than this, where, yes, it's sort of the same thing. It's not necessarily evacuation from a disaster, but like it's amidst a disaster and we only know what we know. But because the characters themselves don't necessarily have huge character arcs, or a stated goal other than we have to get to a place to do this thing, but why, I'm not sure. I mean, I can understand why we want to save our friend who's perhaps dying. I don't necessarily understand we have to interview the president. Like that I think is like the again, not a great example, but it's sort of like two tracks, and I guess it's how a filmmaker wants to deal with its characters. I will say that there is a story being told with Lee that I appreciate, which is it's never outright stated. And bear in mind, a character's goal does not have to be stated outright. It can be implied, and the audience is more than likely always smart enough to actually pick up on the things that you're leaving. So, for instance, Lee, we know, based on just how she interacts with Jesse in the first scene, that this is a character who's been around this for a long time. She immediately recognizes that Jesse is green. She tries to protect Jesse and then gives her the advice of like, leave this behind. Like, don't do this. So we do know from the get-go where Lee is coming from, which is like this place of, she's a veteran and she knows this industry, but she's not necessarily, she doesn't really love what it's done to her personally. And we see this next, she's sitting in a bathtub, she's having these flashbacks of her experiences in war, even prior to this Civil War conflict. And so we see like all of these memories. And then again, it culminates there at the end with the assault where she kind of becomes, she's debilitated by her memories and by, the loss and by all of these things like this, all these things she's pressed down that are now just like coming out involuntarily. And then her sacrifice at the end, I think does tell that is an arc. Like that's a complete arc. So I do appreciate it. I just wish the film hadn't kept me at a distance from her as much as it did, because I would have loved to have felt that more.
Yeah. That felt more like a device than like that moment. I just felt like it was a little bit clunky.
The sacrifice.
Yeah. It was a little on the nose. I think
agree.
it was framed in a real weird way. He went full symmetrical. He stylized it through the lens of the camera, which is a cool kind of thing. But like, I also felt it kind of felt blocked a little clumsily.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot more interesting ways a stray bullet, or not a stray bullet, that could have happened. That like sticking him right in the middle of the thing, pushing her away, but staying perfectly centered. It just kind of felt a little too convenient, I guess. Not
to mention we never see the bullet wound.
The bullet wound, there's no gore.
No gore. You would expect something. And then I would have loved to have seen, and again, maybe this is cliche, whatever, I'm cliche, but the point is, what I would have loved to have seen is maybe how that sacrifice then affects Jesse moving forward.
Okay. We're at my biggest critique of the film is that, like, look, I really like a nice and we're out and ruminate on that, mother effers or whatever.
Yeah,
I like that in films.
Yep.
This did not feel like the right time for one of those.
Yeah.
I didn't need some sort of news anchor. The president's dead. I didn't need that, but I really needed a denouement, like falling action because what my brain told me through that film is photojournalism is the protagonist. Jesse is our like focus.
Yeah.
And it was all about, the way she started the film, the beats that happened to her through the film. And then at the very end, we don't get any kind of like, and here's our character kind of thing. And like, that bummed me out when they cut to the credits and started fading in the photo or whatever. I was like, I really needed like just a 3-minute scene.
Yeah.
With her and Joel having some sort of thing that makes sense of this whole crazy world kind of shit. You know what I mean?
Yep. Again, you could go a couple different ways. You could go the direction of, okay, then the next scene is her throwing her camera away, like, as on the nose as that would be, or her doubling down and doing this anyway, and then photographing Lee's dead body, for whatever reason, and that's.
Do you remember when they set that up and
yes.
the opposite happened? And then,
yes,
like it happened as she was doing it, but I guess there wasn't any kind of like disconnected after the fact sort of thing. I got the vibe that the film was setting it up to be like, she's going to internalize that guilt, feel fucking terrible about it, have it feed into the same crap and basically feed the same cycle because war doesn't stop.
Doesn't end. Yeah.
So it's an inherently cynical film.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way around that, but how can you not be cynical about the horrors of war?
Well, I mean, what you don't want is, the sacrifice happens. And then the scene where she goes home to her parents and ignores all the conflict. And she's out like milking the cows or something. And I'm walking on sunshine, freeze frame. And like, Jesse lived the rest of her life in Wisconsin. Like, like you don't want whatever, but like,
The closest thing to that I would have accepted is if they're like, you know, there's still pockets of skirmishes for people who have yet to kind of like surrender or something. And she and Joel are like, let's go. You know, like,
yeah, right. Yes.
Let's roll.
Let's roll. Roll out.
Yeah, because I don't think any of the intent was to talk that character out of doing what she's doing. I think the movie was saying this is how extremely stressful and sort of fucked up the lives of these people have to be, but this is so important. Like you see what happens when you close people out. Close photojournalists out of conflict zones. You have no eyes to know what's going on. So.
What is interesting that I wish they had doubled down on is that it's Joel, right? That's his character's name. That I wish they had doubled down on the idea that Joel sees Lee die and then doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that would have been super interesting. That this whole film they seem like, you know, almost like siblings, you know, they're like, they're super tight. And then suddenly she's dead and he's like, whatever.
Yeah.
Just another casualty. And I wish they had doubled down on that because that's a cool idea.
Yeah. Cause as it is, you could probably like, you know, say that the adrenaline of the situation and forward. So you don't really know.
I mean, he clearly has a job to do and the time is now. So it totally could have been like, I cannot deal with that right now. I have to go forward. But I wish they had doubled down on the idea, like, you know, if Jesse had been distraught and he's just like, whatever, it's just a body, you know, or, you know, just some quick little mention of like, it doesn't matter. Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It maybe had too much of a heart for that.
Yeah.
I was going to tell one funny anecdote unless you had something poignant to say, Connor.
No, I don't. I don't have anything to say.
So like the screening that I was in, pretty full film. It was on Sunday in the evening. And you know, the audience was reacting to things, you know, when they needed to. You loud startling noise, you know, tension of the situation with Jesse Plemons and everything like that. And the one that like it was indicative of how kind of like startling that this scene was, but also it was just kind of undercut by what happened in the screening. So there's this part in the White House where they get to the press secretary is in the press briefing room, and they walk in, and as far as we are, I think my understanding is correct. It's the Western forces that we are following with, which is the largest combatants against the what are they calling it?
The loyalist states.
States or whatever. And so they walk in and she's there to basically like negotiate the president's surrender. And like they give her maybe 8 to 10 seconds of discussing the matter before one of them just shoots her. And it's like whoever sound mixed that scene, one thing I loved about this film is it did not lean into like war films where you're just barraged with a sound that becomes like a white noise. Like every single thing during these kind of battle sequences really just like hurt a lot more, I guess. And so that happened and it caught so much of the audience off guard that nobody in the theater had an audible reaction except for this one guy. This one guy just goes, damn. And I just clipped my mic. I know I did. But he didn't do it to be funny. He actually was that startled. Like you could tell, like nobody in the theater got upset at him or anything. But like everybody, like the silence after that rang out, there was like no audio besides that like reverb deadened drop off from the room noise or something like that. And I just thought that was... You don't see that happen in movies very often.
I have a similar story. It was first of all, so the sound mix was great in this film.
Yeah, I agree.
Every gunshot was startling. I jump scared twice just from gunshots. And I'm like, yeah, that's effective.
People appreciated that. They're like, the gunshots are actually like loud like they are in real life and concussive and disruptive and, you know.
For sure. And then, but I have a similar story. And it was at the end there when Lee jumps out to save Jesse. And it kind of gets quiet for a second. And like she's taking pictures. There's a lady down front that just goes, "Oh, girl, you done it now."
Oh, Atlanta never changed.
I know.
That's hilarious. You done it
you
now.
done it now.
Okay. And now, okay. All right. So that that makes me want to tunnel into what that type of person who would do that type of remark in a film was thinking during the rest of the
movie. Yeah, exactly.
Because they got in there and they'd be like, who's the good guys and bad guys here? What's going on? I'm going to start talking at this movie.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Oh, girl, you done it now.
That's hilarious.
I also I forgot until just now that the scene where they stop for gas and there's the car wash with the guys tied up is another pretty effective scene for me where I'm like, oh, cool. Like this is how this war is affecting the people. The citizens are just kind of like going, barbaric.
Yeah.
Yeah. And his whole point, he's like, I went to high school with that guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God.
Yeah.
Like,
although I will say I'm 95% sure that was shot near my house, and
it looked like Northern Georgia, like so much. And that's not where they were in the film.
I was getting big Walking Dead vibes from that scene. But I do know that this was partially filmed in Georgia because that opening scene where the flag, the kamikaze like flag carrying person goes in and they blow up, that was Atlanta. I drive past that building every day. So like I know for a fact it was shot at least partially in Atlanta. And
it was.
There's this big, I don't even know what the building is, but there's like this big, like steepled.
You talking about where they were able to get the wide shot for the effects?
Yeah. And it was like this big steepled building that says Jesus Saves. I don't even know what the building is. I guess maybe it's a church. I don't know. But it's like this big steepled building. I drive past that every day. It's right off the interstate. And so I was like, oh, okay, so this is in Georgia. And then you see that scene. And I'm like, yeah, this is some big Walking Dead vibes. But then it dropped off and I didn't really get that vibe throughout the rest. But like that specifically, I was like, yeah, this is
I think the fact that you feel that way, and that was the one scene in the movie where that I recognize just the vibe of that area so much, and like the trees and the way that they got off the highway and everything, that it actually confused me for the storyline, because I was like, wait, how did we get down to Georgia? Because I thought we were going, and then I realized they never actually defined it as that, and I was like, I think they fucking filmed that in Georgia.
Yeah, they did. They totally did. They totally did.
Yeah, I'm looking at a production sheet right now. It was.
Yep.
Anyway, one of the criticisms by one of the guys at work that he and I either really agree or really disagree. Usually we really disagree about television and we do agree about films. He said, he's like, Civil War was good. Definitely felt like it wasn't written by an American. And he said, Twitter, you can't really tell what his phrasing, his tone was. Yeah. But I think that really does sum it up. It's someone else's observations on our culture and trying to spook us.
Yes.
Into action.
I don't know. I think spooking us into drawing a line. It's not asking you to make a huge moral standpoint. It's telling you like there has to be some line where you go, this can't go to violence. Like this cannot happen.
It's kind of the movie sort of is without a message in a sense there. Like that's what I mean by like the clear moral distinction. Like there is no call to action other than it's pretty fucking bad, right? Hey,
this sucks.
Hey, wait, say that like a British person. It's a wee bit tragic, isn't it?
I like that Kellen goes immediately to Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. Like,
I was going to go to the Beatles. Oh, it's pretty fucking bad. Pretty bad, right? That's pretty, I don't know, John. It's pretty bad.
I just go for the low class, like, whatever a London hick would be.
Like Oliver Twist.
Yeah.
Eat it. Terrible.
It's terrible.
Regrettable, isn't it?
Oh my God, Alex Garland, if you ever somehow hear this, I do respect you as a filmmaker.
I just want to say a quick apologies from the Hoopercast for any of our British viewers.
I just know that y'all do that enough. I felt like I needed to make that happen.
Yeah, we've already transgressed the British. So
with every Beatles impression we do, we lose another Brit audience member.
We go from 1 back to 0 every week.
every week. There's one Liverpudlian guy that loves the show, and every week he tunes back out.
He's like, I think they do a good job.
I'm gonna give that show another try.
That's pretty good. So in that sense, like it's kind of weird because it doesn't, it almost comes off like he doesn't, like he avoids direct like issues or like relevant dynamics almost out of ignorance. Like, I'm going to write a movie about Civil War in the US, but I'm not going to watch the news or do any research.
I think he does, but I think he wrote the bulk of it. He wrote when it wasn't such a gauche topic.
He wrote it in 2020. It almost feels more like a commentary on the pandemic than it does on American civil discourse, like politically. I don't know. I feel like that tracks more because if as a Brit, he was probably in lockdown for a lot of 2020. And I'm wondering if those sorts of feelings of isolation and the breakdown of like federal rule of law maybe is informing this script more than like partisan conflict and that sort of thing. Because as we say, like the movie is, it's a bunch of different things at once. It's like what it is broadly is a snapshot of what it's like a thought experiment of like, how would a civil conflict impact different types of people? But then we're going to like only localize those types of people to one subset of journalists, photojournalists, not even like reporters or news anchors, the soldiers in the conflict without specifying who is what and why and when, and a president who we're not going to see for most of it. We're just sort of left to think, like for most of the movie, I was sort of asking myself, like, especially when we get to Washington, like, where is the army? Like, are most of them dead already? Is that why it feels like there's only like 36 soldiers?
They said like all the generals had surrendered.
So it's like, okay. And stuff like that can't bring me back to like the budget. Like, it's probably
we can only afford one street corner.
Yeah.
That felt like a soundstage to me.
Yeah. With a digital background extension,
guys.
Yeah. Right after the Mandalorian, they just walked off. Skook. There's only small pockets of like things you can kind of read into the specifics of the conflict. Like, as we say, like Nick Offerman's like a authoritarian president who mentions every now and then. There's a couple of things about like a Christian nation and like a lot of.
Wait, I was looking out for that. They actually said that?
Yeah. Once in one voiceover radio address or something.
2 or 3 times. I think every time he speaks, he signs off with like "In God We Trust" or
that's more
"God
like
Bless America."
No, there was one. There was like one like explicitly like Christian nation thing, not just not just God Bless, but it was once. I remember thinking like, oh well, there's the one. But it never comes into play, and there's no like, there's no scene of like, certain other religious groups. Like, it's not like that mass grave was filled with like, another religion.
You can say Jews in this regard. Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah, of like Muslims or Jewish people or like, Hare Krishnas.
Yeah.
Don't bring George Harrison into this again.
But like, and then someone pointed out how like a lot of the Western forces are, and a lot of like the factions who are not loyalists are people of color. So there's only like a slight hint that he's some kind of Christian nationalist, president, and the rebelling forces are, more left leaning but it's not really, that's really like a small hint versus like something
leaning plus Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
That was obviously everybody called that. They're like, you're not making any stands here.
That's one. Exactly. Like, that's one of the first things that the guy next to me, the guy to my left, the guy to my right fell asleep. The guy to my left, he kept waking himself up with his own snoring. I'd be like, there'd be like gunfire, and he'd go like, and like kind of like look around, like, where the fuck am I?
And the screening was at 2 p.m.
You should have screamed in his face.
It was. I'm not kidding. It was like a 1:45 showing on a Saturday. This man had no excuse.
I was about to say the dude chose that to be his pick me up for the day. So on Sunday I had I have a trip I want to do next year where I need to be in better shape for. It's like a hiking, trekking sort of thing. And so on Sundays, I'm just deciding I'm going to try to walk 10 miles at least. So all Sunday, I just walked out of my house, I only got about 8 miles, but I walked through this new development area that's over by one of the Draft House theaters where I was going to see the film. And I just walked around, had a beautiful day, like walked in the wildflowers, pet a bunch of dogs, had some cold beverages and stuff. And I was like, feeling really great. And I was like, really wish I wasn't going to this movie today. So like I met my buddy at the bar across the street. We had like some nachos and I went in and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to get bummed out. And then sure enough, all day on Monday, I was like, God, I'm in such a bad mood.
I should have seen Wonka.
Yeah, right. No.
The point being, I guess I'm saying like the movie is doing a bunch of things at once, but it's not really committing to any of them necessarily. Like on the character front, you're almost seeing like a coming of age / loss of innocence movie with Jessie. Like she's very green, and throughout the course of the movie, she's going to become, one clear arc is she's a lot more confident and committed to her calling as a photojournalist. Whereas at the beginning of the movie, she's having to be pulled out of harm's way a lot. And she's, too scared to take pictures at a certain point. And then ultimately at the end of the film, when her mentor is killed right in front of her, she's able to get the shot and move forward and keep going. But you're right. There should have been a denouement where there's some hint that she's going to avoid the same fate as Lee. And Lee has a downward arc to where like all this trauma is finally getting to her. Someone pointed out that there's like a mention of a lack of ability to affect change that's plaguing her character. I don't know if that's explicit in the text or if that's something
she says it.
Right. So I don't know what her arc necessarily is other than saving Jessie being the way you affect, because there is no change affected by their actions in the movie. It's all observance and the ability to keep pursuing truth. Again, doesn't come to a conclusion like the pursuance of truth helped us end the conflict. It's more like the pursuit of truth is why we're going to the White House.
In that way, would you find it agreeable or more thematically suitable if then whatever tag they have with the Jessie character is, reinforces that idea that clearly Lee didn't want her to become like her. So, and Lee was like, you're going to have to repress all this. You're going to have to just relieve yourself of the moral implications of all of this. If Jessie found some way to be a better photojournalist and I'm going to maintain my morality, I'm going to maintain my stance on this while also doing so essentially she becomes the better version of Lee. Is that where you wanted it to go? Or do you think that in and of itself is too cliched for this film? Because that's what I'm coming up against is I've said that a few times already in the review. It's anything you come up with feels too cliched for the film.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I would prefer. You either have her, somehow deciding this isn't for me, but that sort of betrays the actual growth of, I got the shot. Lee has that moment in the movie where she has a shot. She has, what's his name's death, Sammy's body, and she deletes the picture and decides it's not worth, this sort of thing. And it would have been good to have even just a shot of Jessie has that photo of Lee being shot and maybe she deletes it from hers. And so you could hint that she's having the same, it's just
that would have been really good.
It's like poetry. Yeah. It's like they rhyme.
It's they rhyme.
Yeah. You have her have that realization.
And then you ruined it with that.
At the beginning of their career, at the beginning of her career and not at the end or in the twilight of her career, like Lee. And so you hint that she may have a better future.
That's interesting. I didn't read Lee deleting that photo in that way. I like that read of it. I read it more as she took the photo and then deleted it because she is repressing the tragedy of it. So it wasn't necessarily about affecting change, but it was an externalization of the internal deletion of the depression. In other words, like that's how I read it. It was an externalization of that.
I mean, it kind of can be both.
I think it can be. I didn't read it the way Hooper read it, and I like that. I think that works, and maybe it is both. And
it could just be the loss on the personal level for her is what finally like that aversion to it's like the tipping point almost. Like finally, I've witnessed like the destruction of this on a personal level. One of my colleagues has been killed, and my reflex, as always, was to get the shot. And now that I'm looking at it and I'm seeing my dead friend, I'm sort of realizing that this is sort of too close to home, and now I'm having trouble compartmentalizing. You know,
it also is a direct contradiction to what she told she would do to Jesse.
Yeah.
She said, if I died, and would you take the photo? And she's like, yeah.
Yes.
And so she actually did take the photo of one of like her mentor. Dead.
Yeah.
So she's still that. It's not a moral thing. It's like she's still that conflicted with that being her job kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know. I thought that moment was poignant, but it is weird that there's these little breadcrumbs of things that could be picked up and hit upon later that wouldn't feel cliche in any kind of way. It's filmmaking. Like everything is a little bit poetic.
Yes.
It's one of the films that
rhymes.
like
stop it.
I want to I would rewatch it in the sense of I want to track certain things. Like I would rewatch it again just to track Lee's character and watch it more. The kind of things that make films rewatchable other than, okay, cool. Like we know what the plot is. We know how it's going to end. We know what kind of movie it is. And so you go back through to study it. And so now we're going to track character arcs and figure out if they make sense, or I'm going to pay a specific attention to where geographically they are in the film when certain things happen to see if there's a statement about that. Because mostly, as y'all said, it's largely about too how in times of war and legal upheaval where the authorities are elsewhere, how smaller towns and how opportunists can suddenly creep up and when no one's looking and live out their terrifying fantasies of, in the Jesse Plemons case, like ethnic cleansing of non-white people, basically. And that was a scary scene for that reason, because like in the midst of this huge problem being a civil war, the most pressing, dangerous situation is there's 6 people standing on a road somewhere, and we're not sure if the characters are going to escape. And those are effective and sort of speak to like, it almost doesn't matter what the broader conflict is, because the effect of it is people like Jesse Plemons get to walk around and kill anyone they want. Because there is no more law enforcement. So in a way, it's almost a statement too of how unequipped a country as ours could be in terms of managing crisis. It's like a statement on that as well. But it sort of usually those things come together into a narrative where like it tells a character-based story. It has a broader theme, and then it has these little moments of realism and, oh, that would happen, that kind of give it texture. And the movie is all those things. It just sort of doesn't become more greater than the sum of its parts. Instead, you have just a movie where things happen and then it ends. And then you go, okay, these are all cool things to say. I'm just not sure we said them the right way, or we said them clearly enough or well enough.
Well, it's like Kellen said. I mean, I think that it was always going to be a losing battle in terms of like producing this. And I don't know if anybody could have done it any better, because the idea like that simple premise of like, we're going to set this somewhere else. It's not going to be based in our partisan politics. It's not going to like have anything like that to say immediately. Like, because here's the thing. the American audience who are going to be viewing this film are going to come into it with partisan politics in mind. We're going to come into it like expecting that, because that's how we would expect a civil war to play out.
Mm-hmm.
So because the film made the filmmaker made the conscious choice to not dabble in that, even if like Kellen said, their toes are in the water, like they're making the choice like to largely go away from it, it's never going to be ultimately satisfying to the audience who will come in wanting that regardless.
Yeah.
So I think it was always going to be a losing battle, but I will say, like, what's really interesting, I was never ready to write this movie off. I was ready for it to like live in mid territory forever, and I would never revisit it. But honestly, like talking about it with you guys has bumped it up a little bit, because I do more clearly see the intention now. I do more clearly see the arcs. But like Kellen said, there were breadcrumbs that I wish were picked up, and like there was a film, I can't remember what it was, Hooper, that we reviewed recently, and I said the same thing. It was like they started a bunch of stories that they never finished, and this does seem to happen fairly often in Hollywood. It's like,
I was gonna say that does not narrow it down.
No, it does not. It's like here's a whole bunch of things, we're gonna start it, and then we just never really explore it to a satisfactory level. And I feel like this is an example of that. And, I so badly want this to not live in cliche territory. Like I want it to be this weird artistic, thing that is just different than everything else. But at the same time, you do have to abide by, the way that we in America, especially we in the West, watch films, is like we do just sort of subconsciously track these things. And in order for, like, we've talked about this before, like I'm big on act structure. I'm big on the acts in general. And I think that's because our brains are hardwired in the West to accept stories in that way. And when a film deviates from that, and when a film doesn't do the things that we expect it to narratively, we immediately, like, it's like, I think Mr. Plinkett said this one time, like, you may have not noticed it, but your brain sure did.
But your brain did.
It's like that it's that thing. Like you definitely do pick up on that. And so whether anybody out there is thinking about it as deeply as we are and thinking like, look at all these breadcrumbs that they didn't follow up on, your brain notices. And I do think that maybe that's also part of the struggle with the film, is like, we're noticing all these things and we just want more of it. We just, yeah.
Yeah. I think if I was supposed, like based on this conversation, if I could ask Alex Garland one thing, I would say, did you intend for there to be any sort of catharsis in this film? He would probably be like, no.
I would ask him, why didn't you put the bear in this one?
That would have been dope. No, bear. It's so scary. That should just be his mascot.
He's in every movie.
Yeah, I think if pressed, he would say there's no catharsis to be had in this film.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me not want to watch it again.
Yep.
It's not enough to make me knock it down a few pegs, but it's sure not going to please you in the relatively specific form of that word.
Yes.
You're not going to want to. You're not going to turn and go, oh, what a good film. All right, let's go do something. You're going to go,
great.
Oh, God.
Let's go play putt-putt. Yeah.
And I couldn't even eat my pizza. Man, I was at the draft house and I had 2 pieces of it. I had to eat the rest the next day because I wasn't hungry. There was one dude who was munching down during the bodies in a pit scene, and I couldn't get over it. I was like, my guy
was eating taffy.
It was popcorn. He was just really just going at it.
You think he was stressy, or do you think he was like, this is invigorating?
I don't know, but I couldn't eat during.
Or he's like, oh shit. What kind of eating was it?
All I heard
it was fistful, not to the point where like tons would fall, but like enough that he was mushing it into his mouth.
He wasn't going full blown Cookie Monster yet, was he?
No, he was going crunch into the mouth, loud chewing, and then like digging back in the bowl. I'm like, there's civilians in a pit.
Just like my dad. My dad eats popcorn.
Okay.
This is a complete aside, but it reminds me when my wife and I saw Guardians, the very first Guardians of the Galaxy film in theaters. I was sitting there, I had my arms on both of the armrests, and on my left armrest, the guy that was sitting next to me, he had his his icy, his Slurpee on the left side. But then halfway through the film, he moved it to the right side, which is where my hand was. And I was awkward. I
don't know why I'm laughing. I'm sorry. I'm just already laughing.
I was like, this feels like a Larry David.
He reached over and he put it in my lap.
I'm sorry. I have been watching so much Seinfeld that this just feels like a cafe bit.
It's like a Seinfeld thing. And my arm was there, but I was like, I'm not going to move it. This is my armrest. I've been here longer. This is my armrest. I'm just going to let it sit here. And so I had dominance. It there. My hand was millimeters away from his drink. And Sarah and I still laugh to this day because at one point during the film, I guess he got too lazy to pick up his drink. So he leans forward and literally, here's my hand, the drink's here. And dude sticks his tongue out like a cow and grabs the straw like Yoshi and pulls it into his mouth and just starts slurping. And I was like, your tongue is so close to my fingers right now. Oh gosh.
Dustin, you are Jerry Seinfeld in this situation. Yeah. And this is just a random, one part guy.
Yes.
Doing that. Yeah. And Jerry's
yeah.
Sorry.
I could also picture this as a Seinfeld episode. Was it strawberry? Yes. Kramer said something like, was it strawberry or was it blue frosty?
He's like, Kramer sarsaparilla.
He's a straw tonguer.
George would be wondering if George would be afraid that sort of thing makes him gay now. He was so close. Why did I let him do it? Is there a part of me that's okay with this sort of thing?
Jerry.
Yeah, I should have moved my hand.
It was so easy to write sitcom characters in the 90s. You just had to make them be afraid of gay people.
And that was somebody's bread and butter for decades.
Chandler Bing.
Yep.
George Costanza.
Yeah. I'm just picturing The Exorcist a tongue action more than a camel or a cow. Just the
and then he threw up split pea soup on my lap.
Dustin, did you recall that exactly one storyline in Seinfeld involved a cell phone? I was watching it and I was like, yes, the show that could literally never exist anymore because cell phones exist. Almost every single plot has to do with miscommunication. And then suddenly when it's convenient, Kramer and Newman are in the mail truck taking bottles to Michigan to get 5 more cents on recyclables. And they come across Brad Garrett, who's Jerry's car mechanic, who's stolen the car.
Yep.
And is fleeing with it. And then Kramer just pulls out he goes, I have my phone. And he calls him. And I was like, what
is this?
What?
You have a cell phone?
It's season 8, but I'm going to make note for the rest of the run, through the 8th and 9th
Kramer
season.
has a phone.
If a cell phone ever... He has a freaking cell phone.
Wow. Okay.
In 1996.
Wow.
And it wasn't that big. I was like, I suddenly felt like it was time travel.
He would have a cell phone though.
Right.
Anyway, that just kind of blew my mind today.
Callan, here's the bulletproof response though is, I'm sure he had one and then he lost it or he sold it.
Yeah. Or he sold it to Bob Sacramento.
Yeah. Just wait till season 9 when Julia Louis-Dreyfus is using a Google Glass.
Oh God. Time travel. You know my friend Bob Sacramento? He called last night at 3 a.m.
He works for Google, Jerry. What's a Google? Oh. I can't do a Jerry impression, but
what's a Google?
That came out very Paul McCartney.
What's a Google, John? I don't know.
We live in a society. Oh wait, we're not done. I already put another haiku in my mouth.
You're just thinking about that mass grave, and you're getting all
getting all hot and bothered.
Yeah.
I was starting to snack on my pizza when Nick Offerman was doing his speech, and I was like, I should probably wait.
I'm gonna be done with this.
Every time you have pizza now, you're gonna think of a summary execution. You're like, you just go pull that pizza right out of your mouth,
and that was a choice He was like, can't make these guys look like the real good guys.
Sure.
Got to make them shoot him in the face.
That's right.
Do they shoot him in the face? I thought they just shot up his chest. Not that that's any better. I mean, they're both terrible.
Yeah, right.
They did cut like to a different angle when it was happening. Maybe I just missed it.
Unclear.
Can we talk about how, just for a second, can we talk about how good Jesse Plemons is and everything?
Oh, yeah.
Gosh, she's just fantastic.
Did you ever watch Fargo? Season 2?
Yeah, he's great in Fargo.
Dude, he and Kirsten Dunst are like that whole season.
That's where they
and Patrick Wilson.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. And like what's crazy about Jesse Plemons in this movie is obviously the whole story of how it was supposed to be another actor and then that person had to drop out and they're like, oh shit. And she was like, I can ask Jesse. And so he just.
You think he showed up with the sunglasses?
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he just like grabbed him at a gas station on the way to set and was like, hey, I'm going to wear these.
He had the gun too. I thought was weird, but.
and the truck full of bodies. He showed up with that as well. We were just going to imply that.
Got my own prop.
Yeah, he's like, look what I found.
Yep.
It's for my Uncle Jack.
Did y'all ever see Game Night?
Yeah. He's good in that.
He's good in everything.
He's good in everything.
He's good in everything. Again, I can't remember if we ever have made this joke on the show before, I'm sure, but as his career goes on, it sort of justifies that like whole Landry storyline from Friday Night Lights where he kills a man.
Yeah.
The more Jesse Plemons I watch, the more I go, yeah, he was
that
totally
tracks.
capable of that.
That tracks. Yeah.
I believe that he did it and covered it up and it never affected him psychically or ever again.
Did you ever see the Jungle Cruise movie?
No.
Yeah.
Jesse Plemons is the best part of that. And he's like chewing all the scenery in that movie. He is so broad in that movie and it's so good.
I'm working on like,
you know what's really sad?
Entertainment boundaries and I'm not going to allow myself to watch that movie.
To be honest with you, if you just like a dumb, stupid, like sub Indiana Jones for kids sort of level, like it's not terrible.
I didn't hate it.
I only have low standards for films I've already seen and understand are low standards.
Do you want to know what that felt like to me? I know it's supposed to be based on like the Jungle Cruise ride, but it felt more like watching an Indiana Jones stage play thing, like at what was that at
Disney?
It was at Disney.
Yeah, Disneyland.
The Indiana Jones stage show or whatever.
Yeah,
that's what it felt like watching.
To me, it was like it wasn't even indie. It was a knockoff The Mummy. Is what it was to me.
Or like Romancing the Stone, or like it's just.
I'm sure there's a little bit of the African Queen in there too, with its being so heavily in a river, right?
Yes, correct.
But yeah,
I fucking love the African Queen. That was my pandemic movie. I watched that shit so many times.
It's a good movie.
I've watched a lot of things because I'm splitting my attention, and that was a perfect split your attention film.
Yes,
like Dustin,
ringing endorsement.
Like, fold laundry or try to get your kids to go to bed while that's playing.
Yes, right.
Why am I eating these?
I'll say this:
hungry.
I don't remember much about the Jungle Cruise, but it was.
I was gonna say I didn't remember Jesse Plemons was in it, so now I'm like, am I really gonna go
excited
rewatch
again?
Jungle
Yeah.
If you ask me right now, how did that end? I'd be like, I don't even know how it started, but I didn't hate it. Like whatever.
Oh man,
I just like Emily Blunt. I'll look at her.
Yeah. That's the thing.
Great delivery. I'll look at her.
I'll look at her.
I mean,
all you gotta do to get me to watch that movie is like tell me how many frames of it Emily Blunt is in, and then I'll weigh it against how many she's not in, and then I'll go, the ratio checks out.
I would rather, having rewatched Indiana Jones 5, I would rather rewatch Jungle Cruise than Indiana Jones 5.
I agree with that. Statement.
Okay, it's settled. I'll watch it.
Just watch it. Just watch it when you do not give a crap and you maybe had too many whiskeys.
Okay, we'll see.
At least,
oops! I get to watch Jungle Cruise tonight.
Oops, all berries. Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
That's a review for the Jungle Cruise.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite way the show ends now. Is
He's gonna say Civil War / Jungle Cruise.
I'll put.
Two movies that have never been mentioned together.
Okay, bye.